The sun was hot that afternoon, burning down on the endless dry land of New Mexico. The sky stretched wide and empty, and a soft wind moved through the tall grass near the dirt road. A simple man named Eli Carter drove his old, dusty truck down that lonely road. He had spent most of his life out here, tending to his cattle, fixing fences, and keeping his small ranch alive. His truck rattled as it moved, and his hat shaded his tired face. Life had been quiet for him since his wife passed away years ago. He didn't expect that this day would bring something that would change his world forever. As Eli drove, he noticed something strange ahead on the road. At first, he thought it might be a broken car, but as he came closer, his eyes narrowed. The vehicle didn't look like anything made by humans. It was smooth, round, and shining faintly under the sunlight. It looked as if it had been built from silver glass. A few yards away from it stood a woman and 3 children. They looked lost. The woman's long, silvery hair caught the sunlight, and her eyes had an odd glow that made Eli's heart skip a beat. Eli stopped his truck and leaned out the window. "You folks all right?" he called out. The woman looked at him but didn't speak. Her children huddled close to her legs, frightened and quiet. The woman's clothes looked worn but strange, soft, shining fabric that shimmered like water. Eli saw the fear in her eyes. Something told him that they were running from danger. He stepped out of his truck and took a few steps forward. "Ma'am," he said gently, "it's not safe to stay out here. You and your kids need to get off this road." The woman seemed to hesitate. Her eyes darted around, scanning the sky as if she expected something to appear. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was soft but clear. We need help," she said. The words were slow, careful, as though she had learned them recently. Eli's heart softened. "Well, you got it," he said. "Get in my truck right now." The woman blinked at his tone, a mix of command and care. She looked toward the sky once more, then back at him. In the distance, a low humming sound began to echo. The children tensed. The youngest one clutched a small round object glowing faintly in his hands. Eli didn't understand what was happening, but his instincts told him there wasn't time to think. "Let's move," he shouted, opening the truck door wider. The woman gathered her children quickly, her silver cloak fluttering as she rushed toward the truck. The children climbed in first, their big eyes filled with fear and confusion. The woman followed, sitting in the passenger seat, still holding the youngest close to her chest. The humming grew louder, and Eli looked up. The sky shimmered faintly, like light bending in water. He didn't know what he was seeing, but his hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Hold on," he said firmly, starting the engine. The old truck roared to life, and they sped down the dirt road, leaving a trail of dust behind. For several minutes, no one spoke. The children sat silently, watching Eli with curious and frightened eyes. The woman looked out the back window, her hands shaking slightly. Eli glanced at her once and noticed how tired she looked. Her skin was pale, her face soft but marked with worry. Whoever she was, she had been through something terrible. After some time, Eli slowed the truck as the noise faded away behind them. "You can relax now," he said quietly. "Whatever that was, it ain't following us anymore." The woman turned to him, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to help." Eli smiled faintly. "That's what folks do around here. You see someone in trouble, you don't leave them behind." Her eyes softened, and for the first time she gave a small smile. It was brief, but it made her look human, or close enough. The children started whispering to each other in a language Eli didn't recognize. He didn't want to scare them, so he kept his voice low and calm. After a while, Eli spoke again. "Name's Eli Carter. You folks got names?" The woman hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Lyra," she said. "My children, Neri, Saul, and Tima." She spoke their names with care, almost like music. Eli nodded, repeating them to himself so he wouldn't forget. "Well, Lyra," he said, "you're safe now. My ranch ain't much, but it's better than being out here in the open." Lyra turned her face toward the window, staring at the passing desert. The land looked harsh and empty, but to her it might have felt strange, maybe even peaceful. She said quietly, "Your world is quiet." Eli chuckled softly. "Quiet's all I've ever known. You're not from around here, are you?" Lyra looked down, her expression unreadable. "No," she whispered. "Not from this world." Eli felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't press her for more details. He could see that whatever her story was, it wasn't easy to tell. He just nodded and kept driving. The road stretched endlessly ahead and the sky began to turn orange with sunset. When they reached Eli's ranch, the place looked humble but warm. A wooden fence surrounded a few grazing cattle. The house was small, its paint faded, but smoke gently rose from the chimney. The golden light of evening made everything glow softly. Eli parked the truck and got out, helping the children step down. They stared at the animals in wonder, the cows, the horses, even the barking dog that ran up to greet them. Lyra stood still, taking in the sights of a simple human home. For someone who had once lived in shining towers among the stars, this place must have felt like another universe. Eli scratched his neck awkwardly. "It ain't much," he said, "but you can rest here tonight. I'll fix something to eat." "You all look half-starved." Lyra's eyes softened again. She nodded gratefully. "You are kind," she said in her careful English. Eli smiled faintly and led them toward the house. Inside, he lit an old lamp and warm light filled the room. The children sat close together on the couch, whispering softly, their eyes darting around with curiosity. Lyra stood by the window, watching the fading light outside. Eli cooked a simple meal, beans, bread, and soup. When he placed it on the table, the children hesitated, unsure how to begin. Lyra whispered something to them, and slowly they began to eat. Eli watched them quietly, realizing how strange and yet peaceful this moment was. A rancher from Earth sharing dinner with a mother and her children from somewhere far beyond the stars. As night fell, Eli stepped outside for a moment, looking up at the dark sky. The stars shone brighter than usual, almost as if they were watching him. He wondered who Lyra really was, what she was running from, and what it all meant. But one thing he knew for sure: when he told her to get in his truck, something inside him had changed too. The wind whispered through the grass, and the ranch fell quiet again. Inside, Lyra and her children finally rested, safe for the first time in a long while. And Eli, though the morning sun rose gently over the wide valley, painting the fields in soft gold. Eli Carter was already up, as always. Years of ranch life had taught him to wake before dawn. But today something felt different. When he stepped into the kitchen, he found quiet voices behind him. Lyra and her 3 children were sitting at the wooden table, looking uncertain but curious. The children's silver eyes sparkled in the light coming through the window, and for a moment Eli wondered if he was still dreaming. He gave them a small smile. "Morning," he said, his voice calm. "Hope you all slept all right." Lyra nodded slowly. "Your home is peaceful," she said in her careful, soft English. Her words carried a strange accent that Eli couldn't place. It wasn't from anywhere on Earth. Eli poured some coffee into his cup, then looked around awkwardly. He wasn't used to company, especially not guests from another world. "I made some biscuits," he said after a moment, setting a plate on the table. "Ain't much, but they'll fill you up." The children looked at the food uncertainly until Lyra smiled at them. "It's all right," she told them in her own language. The little ones reached for the warm biscuits, tasting them for the first time. Their eyes widened in surprise, and they began eating eagerly. Eli chuckled softly. "Guess that means they like 'em." For a while, the house filled with the simple sounds of breakfast, the clink of cups, the rustle of bread, and quiet laughter from the children. It had been years since Eli had heard such sounds in his home. After they finished, Eli stepped outside to check on his horses. Lyra followed him, her long silver robe brushing against the dusty floor. The sunlight made her look almost unreal, like a piece of the stars had fallen to earth. She looked around the ranch with wide, observant eyes, the wooden fence, the small barn, the rolling fields, and the distant hills. "This place," she said softly. "It feels alive." Eli smiled faintly. "It is. Been in my family for 3 generations. My granddad built that barn himself." Lyra tilted her head slightly, studying the structure as though trying to understand its purpose. "You built with hands, not machines," she murmured. "On my world, we forgot how to do that." Eli looked at her curiously. "Your world must be something else." Her expression darkened. "It was once, before the wars, before the council took everything." She stopped herself and looked down. Eli could see the pain in her eyes, but he didn't push her for more. He just nodded and said quietly, "You don't have to talk about it if you ain't ready." The rest of the morning passed with quiet work. Eli fed the animals and fixed a broken gate, while Lyra and her children watched closely. After a while, the eldest child, Neri, walked toward the horses. The big brown mare snorted but didn't move away. Eli watched as the girl gently placed her small hand on the horse's neck. The animal calmed instantly. "Well, I'll be," Eli muttered. "She's got a gift," Lyra smiled proudly. "She understands creatures. Even on our world, they came to her easily." Eli grinned. "She's welcome to help any time." Later in the day, Eli showed them how to gather eggs from the chicken coop and how to pump water from the old well. Lyra tried everything, curious and determined. She wasn't used to physical work. Her soft hands fumbled at first, but she didn't give up. Each mistake made her more confident, and Eli couldn't help but admire her spirit. The children followed her lead, laughing as they splashed water or chased the chickens around the yard. For the first time in years, Eli's ranch felt alive again. The loneliness that had hung over the place began to fade. When evening came, Eli lit the lamps inside the house. Lyra helped him prepare dinner, watching closely as he cooked. She asked questions about every spice, every tool, every flavor. Her eyes were full of wonder. "You make fire with your hands," she said softly as Eli struck a match to light the stove. "On Seraphis, our food was made by light. We never touched it ourselves," Eli laughed. "Well, around here we do things the old-fashioned way. Guess you'll be learning some new skills." Her smile was shy but genuine. "I would like that." After dinner, Eli sat on the porch, rocking slowly in his chair. The children played in the yard under the wide sky. The stars began to appear, bright, sharp points of light. Lyra stood beside him, gazing upward. Her face softened when she looked at the stars, but Eli could tell she was thinking of home. "They look different from here," she whispered. Eli glanced at her. "Different how?" "On my world," she said, "the sky was filled with color, streams of light, rivers of fire, and cities that floated between them. Now it's all gone." Her voice trembled just slightly. "We lost everything." Eli looked at her quietly, not sure what to say. "You got your kids," he finally said. "That's what matters most." Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, they are my reason to keep going." Silence fell between them, but it was a gentle silence, not uncomfortable. The kind that made people feel they didn't need words. Eli looked out at the children again, running and laughing, their silver eyes glowing faintly under the moonlight. He turned to Lyra. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said softly. "No one will bother you out here. Signal's weak for miles." Lyra looked at him in surprise. "You would hide us? Even if you knew the danger?" Eli's voice was steady. "Ma'am, I don't know what kind of trouble you're in, but I reckon nobody deserves to be hunted. You're safe here." Her eyes glistened faintly. She bowed her head slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Eli Carter. You don't know what that means to us." He tipped his hat and smiled gently. "Just doing what's right." That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Lyra sat quietly by the window watching the stars. The sound of the wind brushed softly against the house. Eli was outside checking the fences, making sure everything was secure. She placed her hand on the glass and whispered something in her own language, words of hope or maybe of thanks. Eli came back in, his boots dusty, his face calm but thoughtful. "Everything's quiet," he said. "You get some rest," she nodded. "Good night, Eli." When he went to his room, Eli lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed the day, the strange light in Lyra's eyes, the soft laughter of her children, and the feeling that his quiet life had finally found purpose again. Outside, the wind carried a distant hum, almost like a song from far away. Lyra heard it too, but said nothing. She closed her eyes and whispered a silent promise that one day she would repay the kindness of the man who opened his home to strangers from the stars. And on that quiet ranch, under a sky filled with the days began to pass slowly and gently on Eli Carter's ranch. What started as a place of fear for Lyra and her children was turning into a home. Every morning, the golden light spread across the hills and the sound of roosters filled the air. The children would wake early and help Eli with his chores, learning new things each day about this strange, quiet world called Earth. Lyra had once lived in tall towers made of crystal and light, where machines did everything for her. But now she found herself holding a broom, a cooking spoon, or a bucket of water. The first time she tried to sweep the porch, she held the broom awkwardly, unsure how to move it. Eli had watched her from the fence, smiling kindly. Like this, he said, taking the broom gently and showing her the motion. You move with it, don't fight it. Lyra watched carefully, then tried again. Her movements were clumsy at first, but she laughed quietly when she finally got it right. Eli laughed too, the sound echoing across the open air. It had been a long time since he'd laughed like that. Each day, Lyra learned something new. She learned how to knead dough with her hands, how to milk a cow, and how to fix a tear in a shirt. The children learned even faster. Neri, the oldest, helped Eli feed the horses and seemed to understand animals better than most humans did. Sol, the middle child, loved to take apart broken tools and study how they worked. And little Tima followed the ranch dog everywhere, giggling as the dog wagged its tail and ran in circles around her. Eli began to notice something. Lyra and her children were changing. Their fear was fading. They were beginning to laugh, to breathe easily again. And the ranch, which had been silent and lonely for so long, now felt full of life. One afternoon, while fixing a fence post, Eli noticed Lyra walking toward him carrying a basket of vegetables she had picked from the small garden. Her steps were light now, her face less tired. You've been busy, Eli said with a smile. Lyra looked proud. The children helped. We planted more seeds near the barn. I think they will grow. Eli nodded. You've got a good touch. This land listens to people who care for it. She tilted her head, curious. Listens? He smiled. Yeah, you treat it right, it gives back. Lyra looked at the soil beneath her feet, then up at the wide blue sky. Your world is simple, she said softly, but it has peace. Eli looked at her, then nodded. It ain't perfect, but it's home. Over time, the children began to act like true ranch kids. They helped with the animals, chased each other around the barn, and even tried to ride the old pony. Their laughter filled the air, and Eli couldn't help but feel his heart warm each time he heard it. At night, they would gather around the fire. Eli told stories about his father and the early days of the ranch, how they used to ride for miles just to fix a single fence, or how the storms would sometimes wash away whole sections of pasture. The children listened with wide eyes, while Lyra sat quietly, her face soft in the glow of the fire. One evening, when Eli finished a story, Lyra spoke for the first time about her own world. We lived in cities that floated above clouds, she said quietly. There were gardens in the sky and rivers made of light. We thought we were perfect, but we forgot what mattered most. When the war came, we lost everything beautiful because we had forgotten how to protect simple things. Eli listened, his hat resting on his knee. Sounds like folks up there weren't much different from folks down here, he said softly. We all forget what's important sometimes. Lyra looked at him thoughtfully. And what is important, Eli Carter? He smiled, his eyes on the fire. Family, working honest, keeping your word, and helping when someone needs a hand. Lyra nodded slowly. Then maybe we are learning the right things here. As the days turned to weeks, the ranch changed in small but beautiful ways. Lyra hung cloth she had woven by hand on the porch windows. The children built small toys from wood and metal scraps. The fields, once quiet, now buzzed with laughter and life. Eli sometimes caught himself standing at the doorway just watching them. The sight made something deep inside him stir, a feeling he hadn't known since his wife was alive. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was peace, gratitude, and the quiet joy of belonging. One afternoon, a storm rolled in from the west. The sky darkened and the wind picked up. Lyra rushed outside to help Eli tie down the equipment. Her hair blew wildly around her face and the rain began to fall in heavy sheets. Eli shouted over the wind, "Get inside! I'll handle it!" But Lyra shook her head. "No, we'll help." Together they fought against the storm. The children helped carry the smaller tools inside while Eli and Lyra struggled to secure the barn doors. When the last rope was tied, Eli turned to see Lyra standing beside him, soaked but smiling. The rain ran down her face and her eyes shone like silver fire. For a moment, time seemed to stop. When the storm finally passed, the ranch was safe. The children laughed as they jumped in puddles, and Eli looked at Lyra, shaking his head. "You're tougher than you look," he said with a grin. She smiled softly. "I had to be. I have my children. And now?" She paused, looking around at the ranch. "I have this." That evening, as the storm clouds cleared, the sky filled with stars. Lyra and Eli stood on the porch side by side, watching the lights above. The air smelled fresh and the ground sparkled faintly from the rain. My people used to say, Lyra whispered, that every star is a memory, something you carry with you forever. Eli looked up too. Then I reckon we got a lot of memories tonight. They stood there quietly for a long time, listening to the crickets and the gentle rustle of leaves. Inside, the children had already fallen asleep, tired from the day. Lyra turned to Eli and said softly, "You have given us more than shelter. You gave us life again." Eli shook his head. "You did that yourself, Lyra. I just gave you a place to start." She smiled, a real warm smile, the kind that came from the heart. Then maybe this world was meant to be our new beginning. Eli didn't answer, but he knew she was right. Somehow their lives had found each other at the perfect moment. That night the ranch glowed with warmth. Inside, the small family slept peacefully, and outside Eli sat in his chair under the stars, feeling more at peace than he had in years. The wind was soft, the night was calm, and for the first time he believed that maybe, just maybe, some miracles didn't fall from the sky. They walked into your life when you least expected them. The peaceful days on Eli's ranch had made everyone believe that maybe danger would never return. The fields had grown green, the animals were healthy, and laughter often echoed from the barn. Lyra and her children had begun to feel safe, almost like they belonged to this quiet corner of earth. But deep inside, Lyra always carried a small fear, that one day her past would find her. And one evening that fear returned. It began with a strange light in the sky. Eli was out near the stables checking on the horses before nightfall, when he noticed something moving among the clouds, not lightning, not a plane, but a silent streak of blue light cutting across the stars. It blinked once, then vanished. He frowned, wiping his hands on his jeans, unsure what to make of it. Inside the house, Lyra froze the moment she saw the light from the window. Her face went pale. The children stopped playing, sensing something was wrong. "It's them," she whispered. Her voice trembled as she looked at the horizon. "They found us." Eli came in a minute later, seeing her fear. "Lyra, what's going on?" Her hands shook as she clutched the small silver device she always kept hidden in her cloak. "They're searching for us, the council's hunters. I thought I erased every trace, but they must have found the signal." Eli didn't fully understand what she meant, but her fear was real. "Then we ain't waiting here for them," he said firmly. "Get the kids, pack what you can. We're leaving." Lyra looked at him in surprise. "Eli, you don't have to—" He interrupted her, his voice steady. "You're my responsibility now. I'm not letting them take you." Within minutes they gathered everything they could. Blankets, food, a few tools, and the small round crystal Lyra said was important for her children's safety. Eli started his old truck, the engine growling loudly in the quiet night. The children climbed into the back seat, holding on to each other. Lyra sat beside Eli, her hands trembling in her lap. As they drove down the dusty road, the night sky behind them glowed faintly with moving lights. A deep humming filled the air, not from earthly engines, but from something larger and more advanced. Lyra's heart raced. "They're close," she said. "They can track movement by heat and energy." Eli pressed the pedal harder. The truck rattled over the uneven road, but he didn't slow down. The old headlights cut through the darkness, bouncing with each turn. Dust flew in thick clouds behind them. "Can they hurt you?" he asked, keeping his eyes forward. "If they find us," she said quietly, "they will take us back. They think I betrayed them. I was supposed to stay silent, but I spoke out against the council. I couldn't watch them destroy more worlds." Eli's jaw tightened. "Then they'll have to go through me first." Lyra looked at him, tears glinting in her eyes. "You don't understand, Eli. They are not like you. They have no mercy." "Don't matter," he said calmly. "Mercy or not, I ain't letting them take my guests." The truck sped across the plains, heading toward the old canyons beyond the valley. The wind howled around them, and above, faint blue lights shimmered like ghosts in the clouds. Lyra looked out the window and whispered something in her language. A prayer, or maybe a farewell. Suddenly, a beam of light shot down from the sky behind them, striking the road. The ground shook and the children screamed. Eli swerved, keeping control of the truck. "Hang on!" he shouted. The beam cut a smoking line into the dirt just a few meters from them. "They're marking us," Lyra cried. "We have to hide somewhere cold where their sensors can't find our heat." Eli thought fast. "The canyon," he said. "The rocks will block their signal." The truck raced toward the narrow canyon pass. The sound of engines filled the air now, not from above, but from smaller crafts descending, their faint blue glow cutting through the dark. Eli's heart pounded, but his hands stayed steady. When they reached the canyon, the walls rose high on both sides, shadowing the road. Eli turned off the headlights and slowed the truck, letting the darkness hide them. He pulled off the road and parked behind a tall cluster of rocks. Everyone sat silently, their breaths heavy. The air buzzed faintly as the searchers passed overhead. Lyra clutched her children close, whispering softly to calm them. Eli crouched near the truck, watching the sky. The ships hovered for several minutes, scanning the ground with faint rays of blue light. One beam came dangerously close, brushing over the edge of the rocks where the truck was hidden. Eli held his breath. The light paused and then moved on. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the sound faded into the distance. The sky grew still again, and the only sound left was the soft wind moving through the canyon. Eli turned to Lyra. That was close. She nodded, her face pale. Too close. They won't stop until they're sure we're gone. She reached into her cloak and pulled out a small crystal device glowing faintly in her hand. This is my last chance, she said quietly. If I activate it, it will erase every trace of me and my children. All records, all signals. They'll think we've vanished, Eli frowned. What'll happen to you? Lyra looked down at the device, her voice trembling. It will cut all ties with my world. I will never be able to return. We will be lost forever to them. Eli's eyes softened. You already got a home here, he said gently. Ain't nothing lost about that. Lyra met his gaze for a long moment. Then she smiled faintly and pressed her fingers against the crystal. The light inside it grew brighter, then faded away. A wave of quiet energy rippled through the air, and then everything was still again. It's done, she whispered. They can't find us now. The children sighed in relief, leaning against each other, exhausted. Eli started the truck again, driving them to a small open area near the canyon wall. The night sky stretched wide above them, filled with endless stars. Lyra looked at the stars for a long time. Her face was calm now, though her eyes held both sadness and peace. I have given up everything, she said softly. But maybe this is what I was meant to find, a place to start new. Eli looked at her with quiet respect. Sometimes, he said, the best kind of freedom comes when you stop running from your past. Lyra nodded. And when you find someone brave enough to stand beside you. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the soft rustle of the wind. The children were asleep in the back seat, their faces peaceful at last. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Eli smiled faintly. Looks like we made it through the night. Lyra turned toward him, her silver eyes glowing softly in the early light. Because you didn't give up, she said. Because you cared. He tipped his hat and smiled. That's what folks do for family. For the first time in years, Lyra felt the weight of fear lift from her shoulders. She looked at the sunrise and whispered, Then maybe Earth is where our story truly begins. The wind carried her words away across the plains, a quiet promise of a new life, born from courage, kindness, and the simple strength of a humble man who refused to let go. The sun rose gently over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold. Eli stood outside the small cabin he had built near the canyon. The air was cool, carrying the scent of morning grass and fresh soil. He looked out toward the distant hills where the wind moved lazily through the fields. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful after the night they had survived. Inside the cabin, Lyra was helping her children prepare breakfast. They had learned to use the small stove and were laughing as they tried to make pancakes, though most of them came out in funny shapes. The sound of their laughter filled the house, something Lyra hadn't heard in a long time. It made her eyes warm with tears she didn't let fall. For years, fear had ruled her life. But now, here on Earth, surrounded by warmth and care, that fear was slowly fading. Eli came inside, brushing the dust from his boots. Smells like y'all finally got the hang of human food, he said with a smile. Lyra laughed softly. Your recipes are simple but good. My children say they taste like sunlight, he chuckled. Sunlight, huh? Never heard that one before. One of the children, the smallest boy named Maren, ran up to Eli holding a plate. Try mine, he said proudly. The pancake was slightly burnt on one side, but Eli took a big bite anyway and smiled. Best one yet, he said warmly. The boy's face lit up with joy. After breakfast, Eli took the family outside. He showed them how to feed the horses and how to carry water from the well. Lyra watched with quiet amazement as her children ran freely, their laughter echoing across the ranch. On her home planet, they had lived under strict control, always watched, always afraid. Here they could run, fall, and laugh gone without anyone punishing them. Lyra looked at Eli, who was showing her oldest daughter how to guide a horse by touch. His kindness, his patience, his calm strength. These were things she had not seen even among her own kind. Slowly, she realized what made humans so different. Their hearts. They didn't need to be powerful or advanced. They just needed to care. That evening, as the sky darkened and the stars appeared, they sat outside around a small fire. The children roasted bread on sticks, laughing whenever one of them dropped it into the flames. Lyra looked up at the night sky, her eyes following the constellations. She pointed toward a faint cluster of stars. "There," she said softly. "That is where my world used to be." Eli looked up too. "You miss it?" he asked gently. She was quiet for a moment before answering. "I miss what it used to mean. But now when I look up, I see something else. I see the place that gave me a second chance." Eli nodded. "Sometimes the past ain't meant to be fixed. It's meant to remind us what not to lose again." Lyra smiled faintly. "You speak like someone who's lost before." He looked into the fire, his eyes reflecting the glow. "I have," he admitted. "The war took a lot from me. My family, my land, even my peace. But helping you and your kids, it gave some of it back." She placed her hand over her heart. "Then maybe we've both been saved." The fire crackled quietly between them. The children had fallen asleep nearby, curled under blankets. Above them, the stars shone brighter than ever, like witnesses to a promise neither of them had spoken aloud. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The ranch began to change, not just in appearance, but in spirit. Lyra used her knowledge of alien plants to help the soil grow stronger. Strange but beautiful flowers bloomed along the fences, glowing faintly at night. Eli joked that the ranch had become half earth, half starlight. In return, Eli taught Lyra and her children everything about Earth, how to plant, harvest, and care for animals. The youngest child became best friends with the ranch's old dog, while the older ones learned to ride horses. For the first time in years, laughter and peace filled the land. Sometimes strangers from nearby towns would visit. They were curious about the quiet woman with silver eyes and her children, who spoke with soft musical voices. Eli never told them the truth. He just said they were family from far away, and that was enough. But even in peace, Lyra sometimes felt the pull of the stars. On clear nights, she would stand outside watching the endless sky, wondering if her people still searched for her, or if they had forgotten her completely. Eli would often come stand beside her saying nothing. Sometimes silence was the kindest comfort. One night as they watched the sky together, a shooting star streaked across it. The children gasped from the porch, cheering. Lyra smiled. "On my world, we believed a falling star meant a new beginning," she said softly. Eli looked at her, his voice warm. "Then I reckon you've had yours," she nodded. "Yes, and it's brighter than I ever hoped for." Months later, when spring returned, the ranch was blooming again. The fields were full and life had found its rhythm. Eli and Lyra worked side by side, planting new crops, repairing fences, and tending to animals. The children chased butterflies, their laughter ringing through the air. One afternoon, Lyra found an old photograph in Eli's house, a picture of him standing with two other people, smiling in front of the barn. She looked at it quietly. "Your family?" she asked. Eli nodded. "My parents. Long gone now. They taught me that every stranger is just a friend waiting to be known." Lyra looked at the picture again and smiled. "Then they would be proud. You've given us a home when no one else would." Eli shrugged gently. "Wasn't charity, Lyra. You've given this place life again. Maybe it's the other way around." That night they had dinner together, a simple meal but full of laughter. Afterward, Eli took out his old guitar and played softly under the stars. The children clapped along, their eyes shining with joy. Lyra listened, her heart full. The melody was unfamiliar, yet it felt like home. When the song ended, she whispered, "Back on my world, music was forbidden for those who questioned the council. It was seen as rebellion." Eli smiled gently. "Then let's keep rebelling." She laughed quietly, and for the first time it was not a laugh of fear, but of pure happiness. As the night deepened, she looked up again at the stars, the same stars that once brought her pain. But now they felt like old friends watching over her. The wind blew softly, carrying the scent of grass and the warmth of the fire. She turned to Eli and said, "Maybe we can build something new here, not just for us, but for anyone who's lost their way." He nodded. "Then we'll start tomorrow," and so they did. Together, they turned that lonely ranch into a place of peace and hope, a small corner of the world where love, kindness, and courage built a bridge between two distant worlds. Years later, people would pass by and see strange lights glowing softly among the fields at night, not knowing they came from the alien plants that still grew there. They'd call it the Starfield Ranch, and some would say if you stood there under the night sky, you could almost hear music, soft, distant, and full of love. For Lyra and Eli, it was not the end, but the beginning of a new story, one written not among the stars but under the wide, gentle sky of Earth.